They say that in North Korea, nothing is wasted. But I learned the hard way that some leftovers are more dangerous than the food itself. I wasn't anyone important. Just a cleaner. Not for the streets. Not for the military. Not for public offices. I worked behind closed steel doors, inside the hidden dining halls reserved for the supreme leader himself. The silverware was polished until it could blind you. The air was always heavy with silence, like the walls were listening. We didn't speak. We didn't look up. We only cleaned. Every evening, after Kim Jong Un and his inner circle finished dining, a small red light above the service door would flicker twice. That was our signal. Enter, clean, remove, and disappear. We were always timed, no more than 11 minutes. 2 men for each dining chamber. And always, under camera watch. My role was to collect the leftovers, scrape them carefully into stainless steel containers, wipe the table spotless, and leave no trace. But it wasn't as simple as it sounded. Each shift began with a reminder from the floor supervisor. You are not to taste. You are not to describe. You are not to forget. Every item must be logged. No deviation. There were rules about the food. I couldn't just throw it away like trash. We had to weigh it, log its temperature, photograph the plate arrangement before and after. If something looked untouched, we sealed it and sent it to another department. We were told it was quality assurance, but the truth sat there, quiet, growing in the pit of my stomach like rot. Why would leftovers need to be logged like military inventory? Why did we sign a form every week, promising not to speak of menu design or portion variants? Why did one of the men I trained with disappear after asking why the soup bowls were counted 3 times? One night, I lifted a tray that looked almost untouched, a rare soup with floating white cubes I didn't recognize. Next to it, a tightly knotted black bag, wrapped with red tape that read, "For biological screening. Do not open." That was the first time I realized, not all food in this place was meant to be eaten. The red tape burned in my mind for days. At first, I thought it was some kind of contamination protocol. Perhaps the dish had spoiled or a utensil hadn't been sterilized. But then it happened again. 3 nights later, during another late meal cleanup, I found a second sealed package. Same black bag, same red tape, same stamped warning. For biological screening. But this time, it wasn't leftovers from a half-eaten meal. It was untouched. A whole dish, still warm, unserved. It made no sense. Why would they prepare food, never serve it, and send it for biological screening? I remember looking around the room that night, the cold sweat gathering at the base of my neck. The cameras in the corners didn't move, but I could feel them tightening on my every motion. I carefully placed the sealed dish into the reinforced bin, locked the lid, and called for pickup. The man who arrived was dressed in white, with gloves, mask, and a plastic badge that had no name, just a number. I asked foolishly, in a whisper, "What happens to these bags?" He didn't respond. He didn't even glance at me. He took the bin, turned, and walked away as if I didn't exist. From that moment on, I began to notice the pattern. The sealed food didn't appear every night. Only on select evenings, usually after visits from foreign guests, or when new dishes were introduced to the menu. Once, after a banquet that included a strange jelly-like dessert none of us recognized, 4 sealed bags were taken away. It wasn't random. It wasn't contamination. It was testing. Somewhere in the system, someone was evaluating what passed through the Supreme Leader's table, not for taste or quality, but for something far more dangerous. I kept my head down, but my mind raced. Each time the red tape appeared, it came with whispers, silent glances among the kitchen staff, slight delays in food delivery, sudden replacements of key cooks or servers without explanation. It was as if the food itself had become a battlefield. and a cleaner was now standing in the middle of it. After that night, I stopped thinking of myself as a cleaner. I was still wearing the same uniform, still carrying the same metal tongs and sealed buckets, but something inside me had shifted. I had become a witness, an unwilling one to something I couldn't yet name. It wasn't just the sealed bags anymore. I started to notice other things, small inconsistencies, dishes that disappeared from the kitchen without being served, special menus printed in codes instead of names. Option 7B, compound menu C. Even the way the leftovers were recorded had changed. The usual 3 photos became 5. The scales were calibrated every shift. Twice. A second clipboard appeared, handled only by supervisors, listing items we were forbidden to log. And then there were the trays. I remember one evening clearly. A wide metal tray with 5 compartments meant for a formal tasting. 4 had remnants of food. 1 was empty, spotless, polished. And yet that tray was placed into a sealed case and sent off, as if it held something invisible. I asked myself again and again, why would they test uneaten food? Who were they afraid of? Was it poison? A foreign agent? An internal threat? Or something worse, something being tested, not detected? One night, I overheard 2 men whispering in the hallway outside the storage room. I wasn't meant to be there. I had forgotten my gloves. I stopped behind the partition and listened. The enzyme didn't react this time. We'll need to try a higher concentration. Too risky. If he eats it, then we'll know. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. They left before I could see their faces. But those words haunted me long after the sound of their footsteps faded. Try a higher concentration? Know what? It wasn't about preventing an attack. It was about seeing what happened if something was consumed. And the leftovers? They weren't trash. They were data. From that day on, I dreaded the sealed bags. Every time I saw the red tape, my hands would tremble slightly. I pretended not to look, pretended not to count how often they came. But I knew. I kept track in my head. Sealed bag. Silent kitchen. Someone disappears. Then again. Then again. Each time. Closer to me. It was supposed to be a celebration. A small, high-level banquet had been arranged in honor of a visiting delegation men from Japan, we were told. Scientists, maybe, or trade envoys. The menu had been meticulously prepared over a week in advance, printed on cream-colored paper with golden embossing. Even the plates were changed for the evening thin porcelain imported from China, used only on state occasions. I was not assigned to the dining room that night. Instead, I was stationed just beyond the back corridor, responsible for post-meal clearance. I thought it would be routine, until I saw the tray. It was rolled out on a polished cart, flanked by 2 men I didn't recognize, both in lab coats. That alone was strange. No lab personnel ever came into the service area. They usually waited elsewhere, behind the black doors of the testing corridor. But here they were silent, unsmiling, moving with the urgency of soldiers. The tray held a single dish, slices of raw fish, elegantly fanned out, shimmering slightly under the lights. A Japanese delicacy, fugu, I thought. Dangerous if improperly prepared. But surely, they wouldn't serve that to the supreme leader. Except they didn't. The dish had never been touched. No chopsticks. No bite marks. No garnish moved. And yet it was sealed, bagged, labeled, escorted, as if it had been consumed and had to be investigated. I kept my head down, as always. But something about that moment pierced the routine. The silence was heavier. The hallway colder. The glances sharper. The next morning, I arrived to find the kitchen in chaos. The executive chef, Chef Ree, was gone. His coat still hung on the wall. His knives still arranged on the cutting block. But he was nowhere to be found. No farewell. No explanation. Rumors flew like sparks in dry grass. He made a mistake. He used an unauthorized supplier. He's being questioned. But no one dared say what we all feared. He had been erased. Later that day, a new chef arrived. Tall, silent, with a southern accent. We were told he came from Pyongyang's Central Culinary Institute, but none of us had seen him before. He didn't speak. He didn't joke. He didn't eat. He just watched. From then on, the food became simpler, plainer, but the sealed bags increased. Sometimes 2 in one night, sometimes more. Then something even stranger happened. I found a sealed bag, labeled not with the usual warning, but with a new tag. For enzyme reaction tracking. Phase 2. Phase 2. Of what? Something was happening behind the scenes, something systematic, clinical, and deeply wrong. And I, just a cleaner, had seen too much. It began subtly, like a cough before a storm. First, I was called in for routine questioning. They said it was standard, an internal review of procedural discipline. I was escorted to a dim room beneath the service floor. No windows, no clock, just a metal table and 2 chairs. The man who questioned me didn't give a name. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He simply asked the same things in different ways, over and over. Have you noticed any irregularities in the food disposal process? Did you ever see anyone tampering with sealed items? Do you talk to your colleagues outside of assigned duties? Do you write anything down? I answered with the only safe thing I had left: ignorance. But when I returned to my quarters that night, I found my locker slightly ajar. My drawers, carefully folded, had been rifled through. My personal notepad, where I scribbled meaningless numbers to keep track of hours, was missing. That same week, a colleague I often worked beside Chul was gone. No goodbye. No announcement. Just gone. I remembered how he once whispered to me, half-jokingly, "One day I'll open one of those red bags and find someone's tongue inside." He had always been careless with his words. Now he was paying the price. Suddenly, everything I did felt wrong. I no longer looked people in the eye. I stopped greeting coworkers. I changed my route, walking home. I began to notice the same pair of boots outside the dormitory every night. The same shadow on the rooftop of the storage building. The same face, expressionless, forgettable, in the back of the commissary line. I was being watched, not because they knew what I had seen, but because they suspected I had noticed something at all. I started sleeping with my uniform on. I kept a small plastic bag hidden in the duct behind my bed. Inside it, a cheap burner phone I had traded for cigarettes months ago, and a hand-drawn map of the compound boundaries. I didn't know yet where I would go, but I knew I had to leave. And not because I feared arrest. It was because I feared becoming part of the system. I had cleaned up meals no one ate, logged leftovers that weren't leftovers, watched people vanish for knowing too much about something as simple as a plate of soup. And somewhere in the hidden levels of that facility, someone was testing something on someone. Or maybe on everyone. I was no longer just a witness. I was becoming a liability. And in North Korea, liabilities don't retire. They disappear. I left on a night with no moon. It took me 6 months to prepare. 6 months of memorizing patrol schedules, listening for the changing rhythm of footsteps in the corridors, mapping out the narrowest blind spots between the outer gates and the storage docks. Every move had to be calculated, silent, invisible, irreversible. The only thing I took with me was a single slip of paper smuggled from a lab bin weeks before. It had a red border, faded and crumpled, with 3 lines handwritten in ink. Sample 34B, negative for alpha X9. Trace signs of bioreactive hemotoxin still present. Proceed to phase 3. I didn't understand all the words, but I understood enough. It wasn't about food safety. It was about exposure, about thresholds, about how much of something the human body could take before it broke. And they were testing it. Again and again. Through what the leader himself might eat. I didn't escape through the usual means, no forged passport, no smuggler's van. Instead, I clung to the underside of a garbage transport vehicle, scheduled to pass through a supply gate, into a joint-controlled border zone near Sinuiju. The metal burned my hands. Every bump on the dirt road felt like it would dislodge me and send me straight into the jaws of military dogs. But I held on. For 7 hours. When we stopped, I ran. Through mud, through river reeds, through an abandoned orchard. I slept in irrigation tunnels, ate tree bark and raw onions from a farmer's unguarded field. I avoided people. All people. Especially North Koreans. I knew they would report me for ration points. Or simply out of fear. I crossed the river on the 4th day. The water nearly swallowed me. But on the other side someone pulled me out. A woman. Chinese. She didn't speak, didn't ask. She gave me a towel and a bowl of rice. 2 weeks later, with the help of an underground network, I reached Seoul. And it was like being reborn on another planet. The streets were bright. The glass doors opened by themselves. Everyone seemed to be smiling for no reason. The first time I stepped into a grocery store, I cried. Not because of the food, but because no one was watching me. No one was weighing the leftovers. At Hanawon, the integration facility for defectors, they gave me a bed with a blanket. Soft, real, clean. They handed me a phone and showed me how to use Google. I typed North Korea poison testing. Nothing came up. Of course, the world knew so little. And even if I told them, they wouldn't believe me. A cleaner, a man who handled soup bowls, but the nightmares didn't care. In my dreams, the red tape still returned, sealed, labeled, escorted. Sometimes, I wake up thinking I'm still there beneath the cameras, holding a bag that should never have existed. Sometimes, I wonder if the real poison was never in the food, but in the silence. I live quietly now, in a small apartment near Incheon, where the air smells like sea salt and freedom. I work at a local bakery, folding dough instead of steel trays. No one here knows where I came from. They don't ask. They smile when I hand them warm bread, and I smile back like a man learning how to feel for the first time. But not a day passes without a shadow. I've never told anyone the full truth. Not the officials at Hanawon. Not the social workers. Not even the counselor who sat across from me every Thursday asking, "Do you feel safe now?" Because how do you explain what I saw? That behind the curtain of loyalty and discipline, there was a machinery of testing. Not just on the body, but on conscience. That even garbage in North Korea is controlled, guarded, and sometimes deadly. I think of the people still there. The ones who scrape plates, sign documents they don't understand, and disappear for reasons no one dares name. I think of Chef Ri, of Chul, of the man in the hallway whispering about enzyme reactions. I wonder if they're still alive, or if they were simply absorbed into silence. There's something unbearable about surviving when others did not. You want to scream, to shake the world awake, but you also know. No one here screams from across the DMZ. Sometimes I sit by the Han River and stare across the water, imagining the exact opposite bank of the Yalu, wondering if someone else is cleaning another tray right now, wondering what Phase 4 means. Maybe this story won't change anything. Maybe no one will believe me. But I needed to say it if only once, because even trash needs to be guarded when it comes from the Supreme Leader's table. And I was just a cleaner, but I saw enough to never sleep the same again.